Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
While you're listening, go to ArchPodNet.com/members and support our efforts. Let's get to the show.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
You're listening to The Archaeology Show. TAS goes behind the headlines to bring you the real stories about archaeology and the history around us. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello and welcome to The Archaeology Show, episode 180.
On today's Timelines episode, we take a look at what was happening in 210 BCE in China, Rome, and India.
Let's dig a little deeper, but not too deep. You'll cut off the head of a terracotta soldier. Welcome to the show, everyone. How's it going?
Pretty good. Where are we?
We have defected to Canada.
I wish we could defect to Canada.
Under his eye.
Oh, man. We've been watching Handmaid's Tale, so it feels all too real with some of the political stuff going on in our country right now. So it is kind of nice to be in Canada at the moment.
I feel like we should have requested asylum just for fun.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I don't feel safe in the United States.
I know, right?
As a woman anymore. Yeah. Anyway, whoops, sorry, getting a little political there.
That's right. You know who else doesn't feel safe? It doesn't even make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense, but good job. Go ahead.
Anybody in 210 BCE.
I see. I see what you're trying to do.
All right. So it's a Timelines episode. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So our Timelines episodes are meant to shine a spotlight on a certain event or a place or a thing even in the archaeological and historical record, and then look at what else is going on in the world at that same time.
Right.
So today our sort of anchor event, if you will, is the Terracotta Army in China. Mm-hmm. So we'll start by talking about that a little bit, and then in segments 2 and 3, we will go to other places at the same time period in different parts of the world.
What gets me about the Terracotta Army is that, I mean, China is a pretty well-populated place. There's a lot of people there.
It's a big country, though.
It is a big country, but there's also a ton of people there, and there's a ton of history. There's, a lot of ancestral knowledge about things, and nobody knew about these, ridiculously high number, like thousands of soldiers in terracotta existing within, underground in this structure and chamber. Until 1974.
I know. Like a couple well diggers were doing their well digging thing.
Yeah.
And they encountered the statues. And ever since then, it has been a protected site, a place where excavations are ongoing, but in a limited capacity. And it's just a really, really important site in China and for Chinese prehistory.
Yeah.
So the Terracotta Army is basically protecting the tomb of the self-proclaimed first emperor of China. And this is Qin Shi Huangdi. Please forgive my pronunciation if that's incorrect. I'm doing my best.
Yeah.
And he was the first emperor of China from 221 BCE to 210 BCE. So that's where we get the 210 as our date for timelines.
It says self-proclaimed first emperor. Was he self-proclaiming himself emperor or self-proclaiming himself the first emperor? He's like, all you guys that came before me suck.
Basically both. I mean, he was a king of a regional king, basically. And we'll talk about the history a little later in the episode. But through a series of conquests and just his style of ruling, he became the ruler of a larger area. And it's like, yeah, I'm in charge of all this area. And also, I'm the first emperor. Hey, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so he basically started building his funerary complex almost as soon as he took over from his father in 246 BCE. I mean, he was building this thing and had the idea for what this funerary complex would look like well before he ever became emperor and well before any of the big stuff that he ended up doing for China happened. Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi did not start as emperor, obviously. He took over from his father in 246 BCE when he was only 13 years old. And at that time, it was just a sort of smallish kingdom on the edges of Chinese society. It wasn't a big thing to be emperor of yet, right? But he had big plans.
He was a little country emperor.
Exactly, yeah. Like he had big plans though, and he had ideas on how to expand his territory. And he also at the same time started building this funerary complex that we know today and where the terracotta army is part of it.
Okay.
So there's an estimated 7,000 to 8,000 soldiers, and they are all constructed of clay, of terracotta, right? And they're amazing. They're beautiful. If you haven't seen pictures of them before, you should go look because there's no two that are alike. Facial expressions are different. Clothing is different. Positions are all slightly different. I think at one point they also had like actual real weapons, like made of, metal or whatever
that they were
weapon.
holding.
Yeah, that they were actually holding. So like these guys were very realistic, very true to real life, and very different. There's some true artistry behind it. Really, really cool.
It irritates me that the clothing's not alike because that's not very army-like. They should have been in uniform.
Well, but that is actually kind of interesting though, because not all of them are soldiers. And for a long time, everybody thought it was just an army, right? Just an army of lined up men who are protecting the emperor. But there's also like terracotta musicians who of course are dressed differently and look differently and are different because they're musicians. And there's bronze waterfowl statues too, which are just made with incredible detail.
Yeah.
They're beautiful. There's a bronze chariot with 4 horses. They found so much here. It's not just an army. It's a reproduction of the entire court of the emperor, basically.
That's crazy. Did they have any representations of foods like terracotta cheese or anything like that?
So bad. Leave it to you to make the bad dad joke.
I want some terracotta cheese. I'm going to get some cottage cheese and put like some red food dye in it and something. Well, that would look really bad, though.
That would be really gross.
Yeah,
that's a terrible
not
idea.
just red.
Yeah. You know what? I might edit that out because that is like too gross to even think about. Anyway. So this area, it's really like a reproduction of his entire court. It's really cool. And you and I have talked about this before. There's been a lot of recent studies, not just on excavations, but on the ongoing research on the terracotta soldiers themselves. And the preservation is such an issue for this area, and when they uncover a new soldier, it like is immediately starts to degrade when it hits the air. So they have a lot of preservation issues to deal with, and because of that, they've actually only excavated about 1,700 of the 7,000 to 8,000 estimated soldiers, just because you don't want to excavate something and then have it be destroyed. It's better to leave it interred in the dirt that's protecting it at the moment.
Did you see in your research how they know that there's 7,000 to 8,000 if they've only excavated a small portion?
I think they're just estimating based on the amount of land that they know soldiers are covering. And it is just an estimate. I suppose they could get into that area and find that there's not more soldiers somewhere that they thought there were.
Yeah.
So, but it's just an estimate. And it covers an area of 22 square miles too. So like that's
a large,
gigantic.
That's a large area.
Yeah.
The tomb of the emperor, though, still hasn't been excavated.
Yeah, totally.
Because they want to try to preserve it. They're not sure what they're going to find. And
Yeah. One of the guys in the article is quoted as worrying that there could be like silk or paper or other really, really fragile items in this tomb, and they just don't want to expose those to air and have them degrade or decompose immediately.
Yeah. But they haven't probed it or anything, and
not in the articles I read, they hadn't done any work into the tomb specifically. So, and I think in part this is like a Chinese cultural thing too. They have a lot of respect for the man that was the first emperor of the nation, and they just don't really want to disturb him too. Right. To some extent. I mean, science will always win out, of course, but
I've seen this movie. If you disturb him, that terracotta army comes to life and destroys you.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, that would be a really good movie actually.
Right. There has to be some sort of B movie out there where the terracotta army
comes
to life.
I love it.
Oh man. National Treasure 5.
National Chinese treasure?
Yeah, I mean, they can go around somewhere.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about who this emperor was, because he did some really cool things for China in this like pivotal time period where they're sort of coming together and becoming the nation that they are today. So he was born Ying Zheng, and he succeeded to the throne in 246 BCE, right after his father died, as I said. And they were just kings of like a fringe kingdom. They were known for being excellent horsemen, but there's a a view of them as being like semi-savage, ruled by harsh laws. This is what the history documents tell us about what other groups perceive them to be.
I think I'd be pretty angry as a kingdom if I were semi-savage. I either want to be all the way savage or not savage. Right? It's like, you're just kind of savage.
Well, part of the reason why they called them savage is because they had this idea that is called today legalism. I'm not sure if it was called that back then, but the idea is that they make the penalties for breaking the law so harsh that no one would dare risk it. And the people that do break the law become like the examples, right? So that you don't dare risk that kind of punishment.
Yes, they did that in Star Trek The Next Generation when Wesley fell into the garden.
Oh my God, that's right.
On the planet that has
that's right.
random zones where if you break any law, the penalty is death.
Yeah, exactly.
So why risk death? Don't break any laws.
Death? Just don't do it. Yeah. That's basically the same exact thing. That's so funny. So the rest of China at this time basically followed Confucianism, which is this happy feeling, love feeling type of thing where the well-run state should be administered by the same precepts governing a family, mutual obligation and respect.
Crazy talk.
I know. So the guys following that philosophy were kind of easy pickings for somebody like Ying Zhang, who came in with the harsh penalties and the harsh laws and probably did a lot of killing of people and wrangled all of these areas around him under his control. Mm-hmm. And as his empire grew, he renamed himself to Qin Shi Huangdi, in the first emperor of Qin in 221 BCE. Yeah, so that's how that happened. That's the whole progression from small French kingdom to first emperor of China.
Yeah, and it's difficult to gain, I guess, dominion over a large area quickly without having some sort of penalties, harsh, regulation. Yeah. So,
but you can't maintain control.
Oh, that falls apart pretty quick.
Yes. And this is something that I think has been overlooked a little bit in history, is the things that his empire did to help maintain control and maintain communication amongst all of these sort of disparate regions that he brought together. He created he promoted a uniform system of writing known as small seal script. So all of a sudden, communication between all these different groups became possible because they all were communicating in the same language. Yeah. He also standardized currency, and he standardized weights and measures. So all of those things becoming the same across this large area meant that people were speaking the same language in all different ways. Through money, through language, through the weight and measure of things, all of that becomes standardized, and you can make a true empire out of a place when everybody is speaking the same language.
Makes it easier to maintain control too. When you come in and say, hey, if you step a foot out of line, we'll literally murder you, but we've given you all these great benefits.
Yeah.
So people kind of ignore that stuff for a little while until they can't.
Right. And other things too, because it's all about the communication, right? And keeping control of these people in different areas. And so a huge road network ended up being built. And also he fortified the border with the northern steppes, which is where the true savages were out on the steppes. Yeah. and that later became the Great Wall. In this time period, it's more just like a berm, essentially.
Man, there is no original pop culture, is there? Because this just sounds like Monty Python too, right? Like the Life of Brian, when they're standing there in the Colosseum area and they're going, okay, so aside from the currency, the writing, and the roads, what else has the emperor done for us?
Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah. Well, we can always make fun of things that have happened in the past. That is something we as humans will do forever going forward.
Yeah. It wasn't all good though.
No. I mean, all these things did help lay the foundation for a unified China. Mm-hmm. However, there were harsh laws and harsh penalties. And one of those things, and they are known for this, is book burnings. Yeah. Specifically, the Confucian texts that had played a large role in the previous, in all these areas that had been brought underneath the Qin control.
Well, I mean, we do this today, right? We take down Confederate memorials in the United States because it popularizes an ideology that's dead now. Yeah. And it is a way to exert control. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, I would say more educated people look at some of this stuff as learning from history. Yeah. And maybe you shouldn't, just to use the local example of the Confederacy, you shouldn't have like a memorial or a Confederate flag flying in a state area, but it should be in a museum, should be a place where people can learn about that history and study it. This is how we would handle that, I would assume, today. But that's even hard to say because you look at some places in the Middle East where, harsh regimes are taking over and having coups against the ruling political. They're pulling down statues. They're doing everything they can to erase the image of the prior regime.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that because that's essentially what happened at the end of Emperor Qin's control here. So he's the first emperor of China, but for this dynasty, he is, for all intents and purposes, the last one.
Yeah.
It fell apart after he died. He tried to pass control to his oldest son, who he'd been grooming to take his position, right? But he died younger than expected. I think he was only 49, and he contracted some kind of disease or some kind of problem, and he died. And there was an advisor. There's always an advisor, right? There's always a Rasputin,
the Grand Vizier.
Yeah, who undermined him and tried to instead put a more malleable younger son on the throne. Chaos ensued, of course, because I think the older son was trying to take power back, and there's just like fighting back and forth. And when that happens, it's just the empire just starts falling apart, right? And at this time, many of the terracotta soldiers appear to have been deliberately broken or burned.
Yeah.
And so there's a bit of an assumption here that this was happening at this time. I'm not sure if they've dated the burning and the breaking to that time period. I don't know if you can date it to then, but it does show that it's possible that the quick collapse of the Qin dynasty, this was a symptom of it. But, I mean, he still unified a large chunk of China. And by doing that, he created a foundation for the Han dynasty to come a century or so later and pick up the pieces and then become one of the most important dynasties in Chinese prehistory. So there you go.
Do you think his descendants, when the Hans took over, were like, Han?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Star Trek reference number 2, by the way.
Do we need to have a Star Trek reference drinking game? I think we might.
They've just done so much good in the world.
They have. The future world.
That's right.
But yes.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's the terracotta army. That's a little bit about the archaeology and then about the man behind the terracotta army. So where to next?
Well, we're going to head over to, basically North Africa and the Second Punic War because nobody remembers the First Punic War. Hey everyone, Chris Webster from the APN here. We have used a number of solutions for recording our podcast with interesting people from around the world. None have worked better than Zencastr. For the last several years, we've been using Zencastr for high-quality recordings that are easy to do and put little to no stress on the guest. And now, Zencastr has high-quality video and even automatic transcription. So click the link in the show notes or head over to zencastr.com/pricing and use the code TAS to get 30% off your first 3 months of the Pro plan. If you're starting a podcast anytime soon, it's totally worth it. Again, click the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months. And they even give a little back to us when you do.
Keep this conversation going by joining our members-only Slack team. There's always vibrant conversations going on over there between members and hosts about the topics we're podcasting about and more. Also get access to our back catalog of bonus material and ad-free shows. You get all this for $7.99 a month or less than $80 US per year if you get the annual subscription. Support archaeological education and outreach by supporting the APN. Go to ArchPodNet.com/members for details. That's ArchPodNet.com/members.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome back to the Archaeology Show, episode 180, and we are doing timelines 210 BC.
Yeah.
And we are heading from China to North Africa.
Yeah, so I was looking for what other interesting things were going on in the world in 210 BCE, and it turns out that Rome and Carthage were embroiled in the Second Punic War right at that time period. So it was kind of perfect to talk about them and what was going on there with that series of conflicts that happened over, like half a century, basically.
Yeah. So the Punic Wars were a series of wars, again, that took place between Carthage and Rome in North Africa, which is so crazy to me because North Africa, I don't know. I mean, I know Rome controlled like much of the Mediterranean, but I always just kind of forget North Africa's there. You know what I mean? Like you've got Egypt over on one side, you've got, just a whole coastline there that's North Africa, but I just always kind of forget about it.
Yeah, and these cities or city-states basically that were along the Mediterranean, they were constantly battling for control over the Mediterranean Sea, basically, because it was really important for trading and, building your society. So it makes sense that Rome would want to have control over everything and therefore, get into battles with somebody like Carthage from North Africa who had the manpower and the ability to go to war with them. So, yeah. Yeah,
and something I didn't actually know that I'd like to know a little bit more about is the Romans actually called the Carthaginians Phoenicians.
They did, yeah.
They were the Phoenicians, and that's why they called this the Punic Wars. It's a derivative of Phoenician.
Of Phoenician, yeah.
Which is, I'm like, you were at war for a long time. Do you just calling them that to be jerks? Or,
That's a really good question. Yeah, like, was that just what the Romans called them because it suited their language? But they saw themselves as the Carthaginians, so that's why we, looking back on history, call them the Carthaginians. I'm not really sure what the linguistic roots of all that is.
Right.
So the First Punic War was from 264 to 241 BCE. So right around the same time that our little emperor over in China is getting started, Rome and Carthage are going through the First Punic War. And just the quick gist of it is that Rome won. They grabbed control of southern Italy, Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, all those islands around Italy.
Yeah.
And because of that, they were, most importantly, they're in charge of the Mediterranean seas, basically, all around Italy. So that's what happened there. Carthage was still a great power, and they still had their power over in North Africa, and they weren't done. They were not ready to let go of the control. And so war broke out again in 218 BCE. So just 3 short years after the first emperor of China, after Qin declared himself the first emperor of China.
Yeah. He's like, look at all this land I've got. I've got China. In the meantime, Rome is on its way.
Rome,
one Carthage at a time.
Rome, Well, Carthage is trying to stand in Rome's way. So
that would have been something if Rome had ended up, branching out that far. And I know there was some stretches over into the Asian continent, of course, but never really like a battle with China.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because they had the Greeks on the other side of them who were kind of pushing out into Asia more.
Yeah.
And, Greeks and Romans, they overlapped a bit, but the Romans never really got past the Greeks over into Asia too much.
Yeah.
So,
it's just interesting to me that mostly because of geography. And despite what you might think of Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel, he talks a lot about kind of like why things happened in the world the way that they did. And a lot of it, in his eye, is based on geography. It was just difficult.
Yeah.
There are entire mountain ranges. Mount Everest, you have to literally climb Mount Everest. Well, not literally, but its neighbors to get between Rome and China.
Yeah.
It's just, there are so many logistical obstacles, and then trying to run an empire across those kind of distances would be almost impossible.
The logistics of that is pretty insane, and it does look impossible. It's impossible today where we have amazing communication methods, but there still isn't one single country that rules everything, even though the United States would like to think that it does. But
there's a lot of countries that would like to think that they do.
Right.
But you know what wasn't big? The Mediterranean.
Right.
And Carthage hopped over the Mediterranean from North Africa and decided to use Spain as its like base of operations to build up power.
Yeah. And there they found the famous Hannibal. He becomes one of the most highly regarded war generals in history. And at this time in Spain, he basically started helping the Carthaginians to to attack Rome and try and gain back the power that they had lost in the First Punic War.
This guy would have marched to China because he looked at the Alps or in northern Italy, between Spain and northern Italy. Well, really France and northern Italy.
Yeah.
And was like, mountains, F mountains. I'm doing it.
I can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's well known for that march through the Alps into northern Italy with a gigantic army.
Yeah.
He's apparently started out with elephants. I guess the elephants didn't make it through the mountains. Not surprising. Probably not really suited to that sort of weather.
I mean, he got elephants to Spain, though.
Yeah.
Because I don't think elephants were in Spain,
No,
of
they
course.
must have come from
Mammoths
Africa.
were back in the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's crazy.
Not at this time. No.
No.
They came over from Africa for sure. And I'm not really sure what the point in having elephants were.
They're just threatening looking.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But no, they did not make it through the trek through the mountains.
Right.
So, yeah. Now, the plan for Hannibal was to get into northern Italy and get the northern Italians to rise against Rome.
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't work. He spent 11 years, he got through the Alps, which was a feat in itself. And then he spent 11 years campaigning through central and northern Italy, trying to get these people to rise up and join him against Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And they just never did it. And as a result, he left like devastation in his wake, basically, because it's an army. An army needs to eat. An army needs supplies and all the other things to keep going. So he didn't leave a lot of good feelings behind. And so his plan did not work. Now, in the meantime, Rome, who is under the command of Scipio, he gets control over coastal Spain and was able to launch an attack on Carthage from there. So Hannibal, while he's still in northern Italy, he's recalled to defend Carthage because obviously they need to keep their home city protected. And so that's how he ends up leaving Italy and going back to Carthage. But he is eventually defeated. Mm-hmm. And the war ended around 205 BCE with Rome as the victor.
There's obviously a lot more to that story.
There's so much more,
one of the most regarded war generals and just like returns home in defeat.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy that like the ending of the story is that he didn't win. But I think his military tactics and the things that he did, even though they didn't work, were just brand new, and
ahead of their time.
just revolutionized the way to think about war and how to do it. So so at this point, Rome is at the height of its power. Carthage did remain a separate state, but they had to pay a massive indemnity over 50 years. Mm-hmm. And it just there's just like a lot of bad blood between them.
And at this time, Rome controlled, as a result of that and other conflicts, the entire Western Mediterranean from Spain all the way to Italy and all the islands in between.
Yeah. So I was doing this research, right? And I'm like, okay, that's cool. This is just history. It's written in the ancient texts. It's what we know from the victors, right? Because who writes the history books? The victors do. And I was like, where is the archaeological evidence to support the things that the ancient texts tell us, right? Mm-hmm. So I went searching for that, and what I found is a somewhat recent paper written in the last 5 years or so about archaeological evidence for the Battle of Bacula. And now this battle took place in 208 BCE. Yeah. If you'll remember, our timeline is 210. Yeah. So I was like, yes, 2 years. That's perfect. It's within 2 years of the time I'm shooting for.
Nice.
And this battle took place on the south coast of Spain. And what they're doing is trying to find the archaeological evidence for this battle. When you do that, it's called either conflict archaeology or battlefield archaeology. And it's a whole separate field of archaeology, basically, because battles take place over a couple of days. Mm-hmm. So what is left for archaeologists to look for and to analyze when something only happens over a 2-day span of time? It's just a very different type of archaeology when you're looking at that.
Yeah, you really have to kind of specialize in this and understand how battles work, mm-hmm. But you got to look at the time frame as well, because battlefield archaeology, when you're looking at, say, the American Civil or Revolutionary War, is very different mm-hmm. than when you're looking at, Rome battling Carthage.
Right.
You have to understand battle tactics, understand, did they fight at night? Did they have, trenches? Did they, what kind of things to do? So what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of historical records research that has to go into understanding how two entities would have battled each other to understand what you're seeing in the archaeological record in the landscape.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things that they did in this study is it was more like dispersion of artifacts map so that they could see, because they know which artifacts belong to which side. And so you could see, you had an encampment of the one group over here and then another encampment over here, and then the different weapons that they were using. And you can see like paths and like, oh, okay, so these spears were getting thrown this direction and from here to here, and they all landed in this area. So they kind of could like use this mapping to kind of get an idea of where people were, where they were engaging in battle, and where the different types of weapons were ending up.
Right.
Maybe not spears. I guess bow and arrow is a little bit more likely what they were using, but that kind of archaeology. So really interesting. And just not your typical like open excavation kind of a thing. And they're more using like GPR and that kind of thing to make these dispersion maps of articles. I
think they had spears. Javelins.
They might have.
Javelins were big in Roman society.
So the other thing is this article I found is behind a paywall. So all of this is coming from like the abstract and some of the notes that they released publicly.
Right,
so
right.
yeah. Anyway, so of course we know that historical writings are written by the victors. They can be skewed because of that viewpoint, and the archaeology is hopefully going to present a more unbiased view. And what they've determined from looking at this specific battle is that the two generals that are involved, one of them is Hasdrubal Barca, which would be the Carthaginian side of the battle, and then Scipio, who is the Roman. And it was a decisive victory for Scipio. And we knew that from the historical records. We knew that it was a decisive Roman victory. However, when you look at the archaeological record, you can see that from the place that Hasdrubal decided to place his army and where they were camped and what they were doing, it's almost like he anticipated defeat, set himself up to be able to escape quickly and easily with the bulk of his army and be able to rejoin Hannibal and then have their army and most importantly, the money that they need to keep the army going intact.
And I don't know if it's anticipated defeat. That's almost like he expected defeat, but it's
he was
good.
Ready for it.
Right. It's good to have an escape plan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It just shows like really smart war planning on his part in the places that he chose to be camped, just looking at the topography around and all that kind of stuff and stuff like that. So the victors are not going to give a lot of credit to the person that was defeated, and they probably didn't in the ancient text, but we can look and see that this general was clearly making some very, very smart decisions to preserve his army as much as he possibly could and live to fight another day.
This is why I back into RV sites. I need a quick escape.
It
has nothing to do with how the services and utilities are set up. I need to be able to get out and get out quick.
That's why you sit with your back to the wall in a restaurant too.
Absolutely.
You need to be able to get out.
You need to mark
see your surroundings.
I look around the restaurant. I know all the license plates of the vehicles in the parking lot.
Oh, my God.
I know that the guy at the counter is 225 pounds and knows how to handle himself. It's another pop culture reference. I'm not going to say which one.
Yeah. That's like a 20-year-old reference right there.
If you know, you know.
So, yep.
All right.
Okay.
Well, that's good for that one. They were having a good time there in North Africa and Spain and northern Italy.
Lots of battling. That seems to be the name of the game in this time period anyway.
Yep.
Lots of battling.
So let's go from there over to some people who were trying to consolidate power, but also be a little bit more chill about it and, just take over a huge area. And that place is India.
America. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. At Grand Canyon University, we believe in equal opportunity, and the American dream starts with purpose. To serve others in ways that promote human flourishing and create a ripple effect of transformation for generations to come. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Did you know we have lots of great shows on the Archaeology Podcast Network? Head over to ArchPodNet.com and you can see all the shows that are currently producing podcasts. Scroll down a bit more and you'll see some great shows from the past that still have great content. Search for your favorite shows on your podcasting app or listen right on the page at ArchPodNet.com.
Welcome back to the Archaeology Show Timelines episode for 210 BCE. It's episode 180. And our final segment is going to India.
Yeah.
The Mauryan Empire. I'm gonna go with Mauryan. Mauryan.
Yeah, Mauryan.
So this empire was formed around 321 BCE and ended around 185 BCE in India, as I said.
Yeah, so crossing our 210 timeline time.
Which is the cool thing about timelines.
Yeah.
So at the same time, massive battles are taking place in, Rome, Carthage, between those two guys and other things, because this is a bigger timeline than that. And there's emperor changes going on in China. This is happening in India.
Right.
And it's just like stuff is happening all over the world. And people get so centralized in their thinking about their own personal area.
Right.
And it's just like, man, the world is a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, that's what I love about these episodes, is getting that broader viewpoint of everything that's going on at the same time, because there is so much, and one is not better than the other. There might be somebody who's stronger than the other at a certain time, but the prehistory of everywhere in the world is it's super interesting and super important too. And no one is better than the other.
No.
So they're all cool and interesting.
And what's cool about this too, and I don't know if it's just we randomly picked this time period or what, but you've got, Rome expanding its influence pretty greatly.
Yep.
You've got the first Chinese emperor, and here you've got the first pan-Indian empire.
Yeah.
There were a lot of regionals, and this is the first one to just kind of take over all of India and say, we're one big area here.
Yeah. I was really excited about this one too, because I don't know anything about Indian archaeology or Indian prehistory. I had never heard of the Mauryan Empire at all. So I thought it would be really cool to talk about something that I had never heard of, just guessing that other people like me probably wouldn't have heard of it either.
So the first leader of this empire was Chandragupta Maurya. That's where we get the name.
That's where we get the name.
Yeah.
Got it.
And he started to consolidate land as Alexander the Great's power began to wane. So this is right at the end of the time Alexander the Great busted through there and started taking over places. But so his power over the area, his legacy basically was starting to wane. Alexander the Great's was. And other people were starting to look around going, all right, what are we going to do here? This is our country. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
When Alexander the Great died in 323 BCE, this basically opened the door for regional people, and one of those was Chandragupta.
Yeah, I mean, when Alexander the Great died, he left a huge void, right? Because he was very young and he had just done a lot of this conquering all the way over to India, which is insane to think. Coming from Greece all the way over to India, we were just talking in the previous segment about how hard it was to do that. And here is a guy that did it. But then he died. And he leaves this huge hole. Everybody starts warring. And like you said, it opened the door for Chandragupta to solidify his power and begin the Mauryan Empire. Yeah.
So along this time, he was gathering an army locally and overthrew kind of one of his neighbors, the Nanda power it was called, in a place called Magadha in what's now eastern India.
Okay.
Of course, India didn't exist as a country back then.
Right.
We didn't know it as India. Every time we say India, just assume the Indian subcontinent and that area, but it wasn't actually India at the time.
We're talking about geographically speaking, not from a country standpoint.
No. Yeah. So, but this was basically the start of his empire. This starting to gather these land resources together.
Yep.
One of his chief ministers, Kautilya, again Kautilya, is known for being a political strategist and wrote a text, basically a treatise called the Arthashastra.
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 That's a cool word. I like it. Yeah.
They got a lot of cool words in India.
They do. Yeah.
A lot of sh sounds, and they make really cool things.
Yeah.
The Arthashastra, and that's a treatise about leadership and government, basically. It's kind of a harsh document and kind of a harsh, leadership style, so to speak.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. It actually focused on having spies. And recommended that the king have a massive network of informants to stay basically informed about the people. And again, we're in an era where communication is one of the biggest challenges to running any large enterprise, whether it's a business, if you're building Buddhist temples in China and you're a big family, hearkening back to the oldest. Right. If you haven't heard our bonus episode, you would know. But anyway, this is one of the biggest challenges. So he wrote this document about basically leadership and things like that, and focusing on having these informants and spies.
Makes sense. I mean, snitches get stitches, though, so watch out.
Tell you what. Yeah.
No, it makes sense that you would have a spy network to keep you informed, and those people would be rewarded, and other people would be afraid of doing things because they might get reported. And it's all this system of kind of like the legalism thing going on over in China. So
Now, of course, the way to keep a budding empire going is to have good descendants. You need to set up a good system in place that actually, people aren't too unhappy with, because your people need to be happy. Otherwise, you're completely subjugating them, and that just takes a lot of effort. And also, you need to have people take over if you're going to make a dynasty out of this, like a family dynasty, that also don't suck, right? So you got to educate them well as well. But Chandragupta's son, Bindusara, assumed the throne in 300 BCE, and he kept things running pretty well, basically toeing the family line. And then his son, Ashoka, really changed everything for India. And what he did has ramifications going on through to today.
Right.
And Ashoka is seen as, well, we'll get into that a little later to cancel all that. So Ashoka erected these stone pillars inscribed with the edicts that he issued as a way to, run a good society. But he erected these stone pillars, thousands of them, all across India.
Oh, so like a communication method, kind of like Umbridge with her declarations on the wall.
Oh, pulp culture. Yeah.
Although that was only one place, but like if you create an edict and say something, you have to have a place to put it so people know about it. So
exactly. These inscriptions were some of the oldest deciphered original texts of India, which is really cool. And they're still existing in a lot of places.
Yeah, that's
you can
really
still see
cool.
them. We'll get into a little more of that in a bit here, but how Ashoka expanded the empire. I mean, he was touting Buddhism and stuff like that, but he also went to war. So he expanded by warring with the Kalinga, a region of the central eastern coast of what is now India. After that campaign, though, he just kind of got disenfranchised with war. He didn't like it. He didn't like the way of doing that. He reevaluated his commitment to expansion and turned instead to Buddhism and the tenets of Buddhism of nonviolence.
Yeah, okay.
And that's what the edicts were all about.
Oh,
this
okay.
Nonviolent way of not only expansion, but just bringing people into this into your society in a nonviolent way.
Yeah, I mean that there's definitely something to be said for that. It doesn't always have to be violence all the time, right?
Yeah, you
can go for this nonviolent, peaceful way, and maybe people are happy to join up and be part of your society.
And I don't know if this is the first historical, evidence of like missionary work. I doubt it. I highly doubt it. But it's the first one I've heard of. And his notion, again, after that conquest and his kind of conversion into Buddhism, his notion of conquest was to convert people, basically. And he would send out thousands of essentially missionaries.
Right.
They're Buddhist emissaries, right? He would send these out throughout Asia. And as a result of sending these people out, and then just like any church would, they had artistic representation. They commissioned some of the finest works of ancient Indian art, what we know now as ancient Indian art related to Buddhism in this time frame. So all of this and those edicts on the statues, all of this was in a way to just keep people reading what he wanted them to read and connecting them, like you said.
Yeah, totally. That is really interesting. I mean, we've seen missionaries used throughout history to bring cultures under the control just by using religion, essentially, to convert them to your religion, and then all of a sudden they're subject to your laws. So to know that that's how he managed to do that, I can't really fault him for it, because it is a more peaceful way. Yeah. And I mean, it probably did do good for people. I mean, you never want to subject people to your religious viewpoints. I don't think that's a good thing. But in this time period, if it was either war or missionaries, I think I would take missionaries personally.
Well, and if you're going to take any religion and try to convert people to it, Buddhism is one that it's widely recognized. In fact, a lot of atheists are Buddhists. Yeah. Because Buddhism doesn't really center necessarily around revering some sort of god or deity. It really is more of a commitment to peaceful nonviolence and education. So it's and that's something that's easy for people to see. It's like, oh yeah, this is a cool thing, we'll join you guys, versus you killed my family, I guess I have to follow you now.
And all of it's nonviolent, which is great, because there's a lot of violence wrapped up in the other religions missionaries too. There can be. So Yeah.
And you can tell how popular he was because Ashoka is considered one of the most famous rulers in Indian history, of all time.
Yeah.
However, when he died, he didn't have quite the legacy going on. His family continued to reign, but they had a declining influence. He was really the guiding force for all this, and nobody, I guess he was too much almost, right? And nobody could really fill those shoes after he died.
Yeah.
The last of the Mauryans, whose name was Burdidratha, was actually assassinated by his commander-in-chief.
Oh,
so they're like, all right, no more of you guys. The commander-in-chief's name was I can't get these names right. Pushyamarita. Yeah. He went on to found the Shunga dynasty in 185 BCE, and that went on for a little while. So anyway, it was a long time, and they changed a lot about what India is seen. They created, I guess I should say, a lot about what we see of is India today. And
really brought together these different groups of people under one peaceful rule. It sounds like it might have been like a really nice place to live, other than the spies that would tell on you if you're doing things wrong. But other than that, I mean, you still got to keep control over people. But
aside from the spies and the art and the edicts, what did Ashoka ever do for India?
Oh my God. No, it sounds like a really, really great place. And I just love to hear a more peaceful empire, a more peaceful approach to ruling people. You don't see a lot of that in history. So that's really cool.
Right. All right. Well, that's pretty much the end of our Timelines episode. So if you've got any suggestions for us as anchor events, or maybe even a collection of 3 ideas, feel free to send those along. You can comment on the episodes. Don't do it in like an iTunes review or something like that. We don't get notification of that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's
But if you comment over at ArchPodNet.com/archaeology, and in this case /180 for the episode number, or really any episode, we will see that. Or you can email Chris at archaeologypodcastnetwork.com, or hit us up on Facebook or wherever you see us.
Definitely.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We're going to go enjoy some Canadian countryside, and we'll be back next time with, something else.
Something else.
All right.
Who knows what's coming up?
See you then.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Archaeology Show. Feel free to comment and view the show notes on the website at www.archpodnet.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ArchPodNet. Music for this show is called I Wish You Would Look from the band Sea Hero. Again, thanks for listening, and have an awesome day. This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Culturo Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
This is Chris Webster, founder of the APN and one of the chief editors. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. If you want to keep the conversation going and support us along the way, go to archpodnet.com/members. That's archpodnet.com/members. And thanks for listening.
America. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. By honoring your sacred vocation of education, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. At Grand Canyon University, our online bachelor's, master's, and doctoral education degree programs allow you to balance online coursework with observational and hands-on experience in the field. Find your purpose at GCU. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly.